with over 220 million records sold. Barry Gibb became the heart and soul of the Bee Gees, the band that took disco music to the top of the world. His $36 million mansion in Miami is more than just a luxurious estate. It's the place where timeless songs like How Deep Is Your Love and Stayin' Alive were born, often with nothing more than a quiet moment out on the balcony. But even at the height of fame, the spotlight never managed to erase the loneliness that followed. One by one, he lost his three younger brothers, the very ones who helped him build the Bee Gees' legacy. And now, he stands alone. The voice the whole world once sang along with carries a pain few ever see. Because for Barry Gibb, music was never just about fame, it was about holding on to memories. The stage, the records, the awards. They're not just tributes to his success, they're love letters to the family he lost. If you've ever loved a Bee Gees song, take a moment now to walk with Barry through the highs and heartbreaks behind the life that seems so dazzling from the outside. And if you enjoy videos like this, please don't forget to hit the like button. It helps us more than you know. And feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. A 2-year-old boy, badly burned in a poor family's kitchen, spent 3 long months in the hospital. At 4, he narrowly escaped an attempted abuse, an incident that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But out of those early scars came a voice, one that would bring light to an entire generation. Barry Gibb was born in 1946 on the Isle of Man, the eldest of 3 children in a struggling household. His father was a drummer for hire, and his mother did whatever she could to keep the family afloat. Money was tight, but there was always one thing in their small flat music, whether it was the radio playing softly, the sound of his father tapping out rhythms, or young Barry humming lullabies to soothe his brothers. Melody was everywhere. At just 2 years old, Barry suffered severe burns after accidentally spilling a pot of boiling tea on himself. He spent 3 silent months in the hospital, no crying, no singing, barely any movement. The only thing keeping him company was the soft sound of a radio at his bedside. In those still, painful days, music became his lifeline. 2 years later, he endured another trauma, an attempted assault by an adult neighbor. He managed to escape, but the experience left deep emotional wounds. That night, he had to speak with the police. From then on, Barry grew quiet and withdrawn, but every time he sang, something unspoken came pouring out, something healing. In 1955, the Gibb family moved to Manchester. Barry, along with his younger brothers Robin and Maurice, began singing on the streets to help support their parents. No microphones, no instruments, just 3 young voices blending in perfect harmony, as if they were born to do it. In 1957, they had their first performance at a local fair. Moments before going on, their only record broke. Barry looked at his brothers and said simply, "We'll sing it live." And in that quiet moment, the 3 boys began to sing raw, unfiltered, and unforgettable. The crowd was stunned, and then they stood and applauded. From pain and silence, Barry found a remarkable strength music, and it was that will to live, that drive to express what words couldn't, that would carry the Gibb brothers across oceans and obstacles on a journey to become the Bee Gees. When the world turned its back, how did 3 poor brothers manage to conquer the international stage? The answer began with an ocean voyage and a single note no one saw coming. In 1958, the Gibb family left England and moved to Queensland, Australia. They brought nothing but a few worn-out suitcases and the fragile hope that a new beginning could lift them out of poverty. Barry was only 12, but he already knew what it meant to survive on the strength of a song. The 3 brothers performed anywhere people would listen: fairs, parks, roadside diners. They called themselves the Bee Gees, short for Brothers Gibb, and practiced every night in a rented room, with no fancy instruments, no producers, just their own voices and a burning desire to be heard. Every small gig was a test for a dream that seemed far too big. Then, in 1966, a turning point, their song Spicks and Specks unexpectedly climbed the charts in Australia. Suddenly, the door to England, the heart of the global music industry, began to open. They left Australia with that modest success as their one glimmer of hope. In London, everything changed fast. They met Robert Stigwood, a sharp-eared producer, and signed with Polydor, their first international album, Bee Gees' first. introduced the world to hits like To Love Somebody in Massachusetts. It was a leap from fairground stages to the Billboard charts, a leap that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. But success, as always, is never a straight line. By the early 70s, the Bee Gees began to fade. Tensions rose, their songs stopped charting, and the public turned away. At one point, it seemed they might disappear entirely. Instead of walking away, Barry proposed a bold new direction: disco. It was a controversial genre at the time, but Barry changed his singing style, introduced falsetto, upped the tempo, and brought his brothers into the studio in Miami to experiment. That single decision sparked a new era. In 1977, the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack was released. Stayin' Alive, Night Fever, and How Deep Is Your Love weren't just chart toppers, they became the very sound of a generation. The Bee Gees exploded on the global stage. Tens of millions of records sold out arenas from New York to Paris. They didn't just succeed, they redefined popular music. From a group nearly forgotten, the Bee Gees became the soul of disco, and Barry Gibb, the man behind the songs, was now seen in a completely different light. From roadside diners in Brisbane to the top of the Billboard charts, from near silence to the roaring heights of the disco age, Barry's journey proved a simple truth. Success doesn't come from waiting for the right moment. It comes from daring to change course when everything seems lost. From singing on street corners, Barry could never have imagined one day owning a multi-million-dollar mansion in Miami, where he'd go on to write the songs that shaped a generation. But the spotlight wasn't the only thing he chased. Behind every hit was a life off stage where Barry Gibb didn't just make music, he built a world of his own. When the stage lights burn their brightest, all we tend to see are the cheers, the chart-topping hits, and the gold records covering the walls. But for Barry Gibb, behind every award lies a memory and every number, a note written with youth and heartache. With over 220 million records sold worldwide, the Bee Gees became one of the best-selling bands in history. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack didn't just win them the Grammy for Album of the Year in 1979, it defined the entire disco era. Barry Gibb's name was later etched into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1994, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1997, and in 2003 he received the Grammy Legend Award not just for being a performer, but for writing songs that have truly stood the test of time. Countless legends have performed his music, from Barbra Streisand and Celine Dion to Kenny Rogers and Diana Ross. Barry didn't just write for the Bee Gees, he wrote for the voices that shaped the sound of the 20th century. And it all started with the voice of a young boy who survived a scalding burn, faced rejection, and never stopped believing that music was his only way out. That belief created not just a career but a whole new life, a world where Barry finally lived a dream he never dared to imagine. As of 2025, Barry Gibb's net worth is estimated around $140 million, most of it earned through music royalties and songwriting. From a boy singing on street corners, he built a music empire and a life of quiet luxury, while staying grounded in family and creativity. Russell House, Berkshire, where the first hits were born, in the peaceful countryside of Berkshire, England. Barry lived in Russell House, a traditional estate valued at around £3.5 million, with red brick walls and moss-covered wooden windows. It became the Bee Gees' first real creative haven. It was here that Barry and his brothers wrote To Love Somebody in Massachusetts on a piano near the window, where English morning light filtered softly through the fog. He still calls it music's first refuge, a time before fame brought pressure, when all that mattered was a simple guitar and the laughter of three brothers. But as the spotlight grew too bright for old walls to hold, Barry set out to find a new home, one not just to live in, but to heal in. Miami Beach Mansion, a home built on love and melody from the English countryside to the warm coasts of Florida. Barry eventually settled in a 15,000 square foot mansion in Miami Beach, valued at approximately $36 million. The property includes an oceanfront view, a long swimming pool, a private dock, and even an in-house recording studio. But for Barry, the true value was never about design. It's where he and Linda, his wife of over 50 years, raised their children, grieved the loss of his three brothers, and continued to write music in peace. By the late 2000s, Barry spent most of his days recording solo projects like In the Now and Greenfields in the small studio on the property. Each wall still holds echoes of a soul that's been through pain, but never gave up. Yet not every dream comes true, and some losses are too deep to rebuild. Tennessee Estate. A dream lost in smoke and memory. In 2006, Barry purchased the Hendersonville home once owned by Johnny Cash, a man he deeply admired. He dreamed of turning it into a creative retreat, a blend of country and disco. But within a year, the house was destroyed in a fire during renovations. No one was harmed, but Barry called it a deeply spiritual loss, not just for the $2.3 million value, but for what the house symbolized. He never rebuilt. He sold the land at a $300,000 loss. But the real pain was losing a piece of musical history he'd hoped to preserve. 3 homes, 3 chapters. One was a beginning, one was a sanctuary, one was a farewell. Each house holds a memory. But Barry's story was never confined to walls. He carried it further into the open road, through music, through time. The silver Lamborghini Countach $500,000. This is the crown jewel of Barry's car collection. He bought it in 1978, shortly after Saturday Night Fever exploded worldwide. Paparazzi once caught him cruising the Miami coastline, aviator sunglasses, long hair in the wind, looking every bit the disco icon. But the Countach wasn't about the image. It was the poster car on his bedroom wall. A childhood dream made real, and when he finally bought it, it wasn't to show off, it was to say to himself, "You made it." The Bentley Continental GT $250,000. This is the car Barry drives most often. He calls it the honest one, not too loud, not too flashy, but elegant and steady. He bought it after Robin's passing, at a time when all he craved was peace and silence. Every Sunday, he and Linda drive it to the harbor, sip tea in the car, and listen to old Bee Gees songs, a private moment of remembrance and renewal. The vintage Citroën DS Cabriolet, $140,000. This is the romantic soul in Barry's garage. He bought it in Paris in 1981, after a concert where the entire crowd stood and sang words with him. He didn't buy it for speed, but for the shape of its curves. They reminded him of his mother's handwriting, the woman who taught him his first songs, every time he drives it. He remembers Douglas, his hometown, the sound of the radio, and foggy mornings filled with quiet hope. The Lotus Europa $85,000 Compact, quick and totally unique. Barry chose this one when he began rewriting music on his own terms. It marked his transition from Bee Gees frontman to personal storyteller. The Lotus wasn't about the market, it was about freedom. Driving it felt like writing without expectations, without pressure, just pure expression. 4 cars, 4 turning points. One was a childhood dream. One brought comfort. One held family memories. One gave him a new voice. Barry never needed 100 cars. Each one held meaning, and he kept them not for their value, but for what they represented behind the wheel. And after all the roads, after all the engines. Barry never drove to parties or premieres. He drove home, brewed tea, sat down, and wrote another melody. Because for him, luxury was never about where you arrive, but how you choose to live each day. If disco once meant flashing lights and crowded dance floors, then Barry Gibb, in the years that followed, chose to live by a rhythm of his own. No red carpets, no constant media buzz. Since the early 2000s, his world has revolved around 3 things: music, family, and peace. He doesn't flaunt wealth, but every item he owns carries personal meaning. His wardrobe includes tailored suits from Jeeves and Hawkes, nothing loud, just classic British elegance. He's the silver-haired gentleman in white shirts, slim watches, brown leather shoes, understated but always refined. At events, he often wears a small gold ring, his late mother's gift. His Patek Philippe watch is thin, white-cased, and unadorned, he once said. Beauty doesn't have to speak loudly. Off stage, he lives simply, early riser, deep breathing, warm water with honey, walks along the coast. His meals are modest grilled fish, steamed greens, oatmeal in the morning, and he never skips dinner with Linda, she once joked. He's the only star I know who doesn't remember the name of his wine, just that it goes well with the fish. Among platinum records and sold-out tours, one thing about Barry Gibb never changed the woman he calls home. He met Linda Gray, a former Miss Edinburgh and singer. In 1966, when the Bee Gees were still playing modest gigs, she didn't come for the spotlight. She was drawn to the quiet man whose voice could still an entire room. They married in 1970 in a private ceremony, no cameras, no spectacle. And for over 50 years, Linda has never left his side. She was there when Barry lost Andy, then Maurice, then Robin. She stood by him through roaring applause and the long, silent nights afterward. They raised 5 children together in Miami. Barry never pushed them toward music. One became a writer, another an architect. He didn't teach them to perform, he taught them to listen, the way he and his brothers once did. To the world, Barry is disco royalty. To his family, he's the man who makes morning tea, misplaces his glasses, and writes birthday cards by hand. And to Linda, he's the man who kept his promise, we'll grow old together. When a man has lost all 3 brothers, sung to millions, then come home to a quiet house, what keeps him here isn't the stage. It's a warm dinner, a child's laughter, and a hand he's held for more than half a century. Barry Gibb was never the kind of star tangled in scandal. The shocks he faced didn't come from tabloids, but from life itself. Quiet, personal, and not easily overcome. In 1988, his youngest brother, Andy Gibb, passed away at just 30 from heart failure after years of struggling with addiction. Barry had brought him into the studio, written songs just for him, hoping music might be the lifeline. "I thought music could save him," Barry once said, "but no one can sing on behalf of a lonely soul." Then in 2003, Maurice Gibb died suddenly from complications after surgery. It happened so fast. Barry never got the chance to say goodbye. "I don't know how to write music without his harmonies," he later wrote. And then came Robin gone in 2012 after a long battle with cancer. One by one, all 3 brothers were gone, and Barry was left alone. "I never wanted to be the last one," he once said. "The hardest thing is singing when there's no one left to answer." Since then, Barry has performed less frequently, but he never stepped away. He kept writing. He kept singing as a way to carry forward the dreams his brothers could no longer finish. Few people know Barry also carried another memory from childhood. At the age of 4, he narrowly escaped an attempted abuse. He stayed silent for decades, only speaking publicly about it in 2016, not to seek sympathy, but to give a voice to the children who couldn't speak up. And even after the spotlight dimmed, another weight quietly settled in. Every time Barry sings those classic Bee Gees hits, he relives a time when his brothers were still by his side. The audience hears "How Deep Is Your Love," but Barry hears the ones who are gone. Perhaps for him, strength was never about applause. It came from gratitude, from loyalty, from holding on to the things that mattered most: family, music, and memory. And if there's one quiet belief that's carried him through it all, it's this: that music, when it's honest, never truly fades. When all 3 of his brothers had passed, Barry Gibb once said, "I'm no longer the Bee Gees. I'm just a voice carrying the memories of the other 3. And yet, it was in those quiet years when no one else was left to sing beside him that Barry began writing a completely new chapter of his legacy. A chapter where music wasn't just about entertainment, but about connection, preservation, and emotion. The Bee Gees sold over 220 million records worldwide. They redefined pop and disco, and their influence shaped hundreds of artists after them. But Barry didn't stop at nostalgia. He released solo albums like In the Now 2016, and later, Greenfields 2021, a deeply heartfelt project where he reimagined Bee Gees classics in a country style. His voice, once youthful and soaring, had grown deeper, warmer, carrying the weight of time and understanding. In 2024, a documentary produced by Ridley Scott was released, tracing the journey of the Bee Gees not just as a band, but as a family that helped define an entire generation. The world wept watching Barry stand alone under the lights, his silver hair glowing, hand over heart, singing the first line of "How Can You Mend a Broken Heart?" He wasn't clinging to the past, he was turning grief into purpose. Beyond the stage, Barry also quietly dedicated himself to charity work. He co-founded the Gibb Foundation, which supports research into cancer, Alzheimer's, and mental health. He performed at benefit concerts for children and disaster relief, not for headlines, but simply to show up and raise his voice. And to the loyal generation of listeners, those who first heard words, "Stayin' Alive," or "To Love Somebody" through a cassette radio, Barry Gibb remains a symbol, not because of titles, but because his sincerity never wavered. His legacy doesn't live on the charts, it lives in the memories of millions of people who've loved, lost, and hoped, all to the sound of a Bee Gees song. And if you were to ask what the greatest lesson Barry Gibb leaves behind might be, it could be said in just one line: life may take a lot from you, but if you still have a voice and a heart, you still have enough to carry on. Did you ever share a memory tied to Bee Gees music? We invite you to share your story in the comments below. And if you believe music still has the power to heal, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to join us for more inspiring journeys.